Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Sunday, Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Are we talking about Game 7 of the NBA Finals? We are not, because today was the day that the Suns agreed to trade Kevin Durant. Joining me from here in Oklahoma City, Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
Joining me also in Oklahoma City, fresh off of his pickup game, where I'm told he dominated our producer, Jackson Agello, is Van MacMahon.
Howdy, partner. As usual, Wendy, your reporting is 100% on the money. I was putting the finishing touches on a triple-double performance as news breaks. Our guy Shams, Kevin Durant, headed to Houston.
Every time MacMahon plays pickup, he says he has a triple-double.
Jackson,
funny how that works.
If Jackson's willing to put his microphone on, he can confirm.
He might have had a lot of triple-doubles, but a lot of me-bounds out there as well.
Hey, those count too, baby. Those count too.
Those guys who made a career on rebounding their own offensive misses. Okay. Kevin Durant is traded, according to Shams, to Houston for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 pick in the draft on Wednesday night, and five second-round picks. So they got a lot of picks. I don't know how many of them are going to be any good, but they did get a lottery pick in it.
They got their own lottery pick back.
That is right. I didn't think about that till this second.
Yes.
I didn't realize that. That is their pick. So I think it was at least 2 or so months ago when the season ended, and it was pretty clear that the Suns' primary decision in the offseason was going to be trading Kevin Durant, even beyond their front office and the head coach. And Bontemps was saying, I don't think they're going to get a great return for him. And I just want to tell you that, and the reporting is, this trade is less than an hour old. The reporting is still developing on my end. I think this was far and away the best thing they had. I know that Shams said that Miami was the finalist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Miami's. I don't think it was close. I don't think Miami got a quote unquote outbid. I think Miami.
Well, I mean, Miami did get outbid because they didn't get him.
Well,
this was not a bidding war. These were franchises that were like, this was Houston's best offer. They weren't going higher, and the Rockets accomplished their goal of not shortening their runway, but making a win now move. Jalen Green obviously is the young talent in this deal. Frankly, if we're ranking the Rockets' young talents, I would probably put him somewhere like the maybe 4th or 5th most valuable.
I think he's lower than that.
Maybe even lower. And essentially, let's just be honest, he's the salary filler in this deal. But I love this trade for Houston because this is a team, they didn't shorten their runway. They kept all their young two-way players.
Well, can I stop you right there?
Okay.
And maybe when this comes out, we'll have a good feel for whether or not there's going to be a contract extension. To me, a big part of what happens from Houston's side about whether they quote unquote won this or not is what they're doing about KD's contract. Are they giving?
I anticipate there will be a contract extension.
Okay, is it 2 years at the full max? Because that's
I'm not ready to say that. I'm not ready to say that. I anticipate there will be a contract extension. That's let's just be honest. That's part of that, factoring in that math, that cap math is part of the reason why the offers were nowhere near the value that the Suns gave up.
Right. So I'm just going to say is before you can take a full picture of where this is for Houston, I think you need to hear what the extension is.
I'm going to assume it's 2 years at a high number. Obviously, I don't know that it'll be the full max, but look, man. This is a young, tough, athletic, scrappy Rockets team that is fresh off being a 2 seed that was desperately in need of a go-to guy. Kevin Durant, even at this age, is a big-time scorer. That's the one thing they needed. Listen, Dylan Brooks, the Rockets were ripped for signing him to that deal. He was a solid signing for them. Honestly, I think he's the kind of guy that Phoenix needs. They need that toughness. They need that defense. But he wasn't going to start with KD there. Amin Thompson's obviously starting now and for a long, long time.
Well, not only that, but they needed to KD makes $50 million. Jalen Green makes $33 million. They
They need to make the salaries
needed
work.
20 more million to go into it. And, all right, but hold on. Bontemps, you said 2 months ago you didn't think the return would be terrific for Durant because of various reasons. What do you think of this trade and where you thought it would be?
Well, I mean, this isn't a terrific return for Kevin Durant. Like,
Agree.
This is exactly what we talked about, right? I would say that it's about as good as the Suns could have expected to do in the moment because there just wasn't anything available. I think I would say where things sat by the end of this week, like Friday, I'm not really sure Minnesota was even an option at that point.
I do not believe they were.
I don't either. The Miami offer, this is better than the Miami offer. This isn't a great offer. Like there just wasn't really anything else to do.
The Miami offer, by the way, I think the key thing about the Miami offer is it didn't have Tyler Hero in it. It didn't have Khalil Ware in it.
No. The Suns were trying to get a blue chip asset in this trade, and there were none available. There were not even any whatever the next chip down is, red chip assets available.
Right. Like they couldn't get Jabari Smith Jr. in this deal. Certainly like Tari Eason, absolutely not. Reed Shepard, no way.
They didn't even get Cam Whitmore in the deal. They got a lottery pick. They got Jalen Green, who is a guy that I don't think has a ton of value around the league. We disagreed. I disagreed with you guys last summer on this contract that the Rockets gave him. It did turn into a piece that we're able to use to get this trade done. But maybe Jalen Green will blow up in the future. But now he's on a team with Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. That fit for many reasons doesn't really work.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Just talk about the return.
No, I
for
know.
Durant.
But that is part of the return, right? Dylan Brooks, they could maybe flip Dylan Brooks again. But look, this is to me, it's really what it is. Like this trade is fine for Phoenix in the situation Phoenix was in terms of they got as much as they could get right now. But the reason I've been saying this is the worst situation in the history of the league for a while is because of the cavernous hole that the Suns are in. And yes, this is the beginning of starting to dig out of the hole, but they're still at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. They don't have any flexibility going forward still as of now. Now that could change, but they're still very expensive. They have Bradley Beal with a no trade clause who they have to try to move or do something with. They have to figure out if Jalen Green fits. They have to see if they get something for him. Maybe he's there. Maybe he's not. But, look, they have 6 picks now. They have this first round pick. They have these 5 second round picks. I think they've got 2 or 3 firsts and several seconds now they can trade. My understanding is that they're going to be aggressive this week. They're going to try to retool the roster. I expect this is not the last move they're going to make. So we'll see where this team looks.
Well, this trade itself could expand.
This can't be official till July 6th.
Right.
So
it can't happen till then. So you could have permutations. You could have Jalen Green also go elsewhere, et cetera. Right. But the Suns.
I think it's more likely Devin Brooks gets rerouted than Jalen Green.
Dylan Brooks. You almost said Devin Brooks.
You said Devin Brooks, and I'm like,
you said
Oh my
Devin
God.
Brooks. But yes.
Sorry.
Hold on. Don't aggregate that.
Sorry.
Well, look, to me, what the Suns, we're sitting here talking about the Thunder in the finals. At least we're all here for the Thunder in the finals, right? The trade that set up everything that's happening right now with Oklahoma City was the Paul George trade to the Clippers.
Yeah.
And after the Paul George trade to the Clippers, what did the Thunder do? They took that trade and they kept making more trades. And after a couple weeks, they made 15 trades. They had a whole pile full of stuff, and that started off the path back to where they are now. Now, obviously, they started with a bazillion more things to trade out of that trade than the Suns are getting out of this deal. But to me, I'd be trying to reroute Dylan Brooks for stuff. I'd be trying to reroute Jalen Green for stuff. I'd be trying to start that process to have some stuff to build around Devin Booker going forward.
Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal. I mean,
Grayson Allen's on a bad contract. I don't think they're getting anything for him. Royce O'Neal is a guy that you could maybe turn into stuff. But this is what the Suns have to start doing. They have to start digging.
Well, here's the thing. Bradley Beal, let's just do some math here. Bradley Beal, I'm going to just do it as we. Bradley Beal's making $53 million.
We got Window writing down numbers.
Oh,
Devin
yes.
Booker, $53 million.
Yeah.
Jalen Green, $33 million. In theory, they all play the same position.
That is what
That's-
100 and
That's $139 million.
of shooting
right.
guards of
Dylan-
shoot first guards.
Dylan Brooks plays the wing. I guess he's more of a 3 than a 2.
161 million for four wing players.
Okay, that's okay.
Brooks is a
161
three.
million.
He can guard fours.
All right, Grayson Allen, what position does he play?
He's another wing. That's 178 million for 5 wing players.
What position does Royce O'Neal play?
Royce, he's kind of a 4, but let's call him a wing
Yeah.
player.
He's an
It's
undersized.
188.
four.
It's 188 million dollars for 6 wing players.
Okay, I mean, you need wings in the NBA. Don't get me
You
wrong,
do.
but none of those guys can really play point guard.
I mean, listen, Jalen Green is a complete overlap in terms of talent, in terms of skill set, I should say, with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Like he's a total, like he does not fit. You know, they've got to try to figure out a way to reroute him. Obviously, they'd like to reroute Bradley Beal. Good luck with all that. You know, that doesn't make sense. Brooks, I think you can argue, is what they need. They need toughness. They need defense. You know, they need gritty role players around Devin Booker. But Green doesn't fit there. Green's in this deal because of the salary.
All right, so they've got a lopsided roster. Okay, they have the number 10 pick in the draft. Reasonable to guess that they're going to try to draft a center there, because
No. Whatever they do, please, Phoenix Suns, if you're listening,
Yes.
draft the best player. Don't draft some positional fit on the roster. Whoever the best player is, draft the player. Whoever.
And
it is.
Ishbia's mandate is always everything to win now, everything to win now, everything to win now. You've got to get off of that. You're not winning this season.
I
Maybe
haven't
you can
heard.
squeeze
I
into
haven't
the
heard them
play-in.
say that. I haven't heard them say that.
Ishbia has said that over and over and over.
No.
again. Oh, you haven't.
I haven't heard them say that they're not gonna try to win this season.
No,
Well,
that's what I'm saying. All they have
yes.
said is win
Well,
now, everything to
So
win
why
now.
would I assume it's going to be different?
Look, I'm not.
I
why
don't.
should we
I'm
assume?
saying I'm trying to offer some unsolicited advice that, dude, you've got to
Yes.
take a 3 to 5 year view here, and it's like it can't be this year.
Nowhere,
Well, and-
nowhere is
I
it
mean, we
written that
shouldn't-
they must do that.
Should we 100%
Nowhere's
assume they're going to
written.
draft at 10?
No,
I don't think we should assume that either.
I don't think you can
No.
assume anything. Again, Ishbia's
Maybe they'll trade number 10 for 3 firsts in 12 years.
Ishbia's whole philosophy is everything to maximize your chances of winning now, and it is crippling that franchise's chance of ever winning long term.
They're going to extend Devin Booker for 2 years and 150 million in the next 2 weeks. They're going to
Well,
do
look,
that.
I mean, look, the mandate is clear, right? And the mandate is clear coming out of this trade, which is the goal is to retool the roster around Devin
Mhm.
Booker with what they have available. Now,
By the way, I haven't even brought up Ryan Dunn, who's their best young player. He plays the wing too.
Yeah.
well,
Sorry.
I mean, look, that's all fine. I mean, they also just don't like. Look, this trade in a vacuum, like people are going to go, man, the Suns got nothing for KD. There was nothing available for KD for a variety of reasons. This is as much as they were going to get. You could argue
Right.
they should just sit on it and try to like mend fences or whatever. I don't think that made sense either. As I have said many times, I would be trading Devin Booker and like just starting over because they have to start over. That's not what they're going to do. That's fine. So we will have a better picture. Like you asked about the return of the trade. The truth is, as you said, the trade can expand between now and July 6th. I think there's little doubt it's going to expand in some form between now and July 6th. And we will have a much better sense a week from now on the eve of free agency of what this trade looks like and where the Suns are based off what they do this week. But as Tim said, based off of the Matt Ishbia tenure with the franchise over the last 2.5 years, though now the experts are out of the way, so maybe it'll be different. The expectation should be
It won't be different.
the expectation should be that this team is going to be very aggressive this week and is going to make trades and is going to try to improve the roster with win now moves.
Yes.
We will see where that lands. We will see if Bradley Beal's on the team. We'll see if Jalen Green's on the team. We'll see if Dylan Brooks is on the team. The only thing that I would say is certain is that Devin Booker will be on the team, and Devin Booker will get that extension. And then we will see what the Suns look like around him going into next season. But sitting here right now, if the Suns do something that makes them one of the 6 or 8 best teams in the West over the next 2 weeks, I will be the first to say I am incorrect about this. It's hard for me to see how they're going to get from where they are right now, which is maybe the 13th or 14th best team in the West, to a playoff team.
Listen, it's going to be a tough climb for the Suns to return to relevancy in the Western Conference. Simple as that. And the Rockets they've benefited from it. To have this 10th overall pick that they could use to get a guy who I think is a great immediate fit, short-term fit. But again, they didn't give up like a ton of future assets. In fact, they still have 2 future Suns picks. And those are
better
of
assets than they are now.
extreme value.
Well, that's the thing. When they did the deal last summer with Brooklyn, where they got the 2 firsts and the swap, the concept was, they're going to trade those for Durant. They end up getting Durant for 1/3 of that stuff.
Yeah. And they also have the Mavs 29 pick out of that deal. So it's really 3 picks in a swap. And by the way, what was the most valuable asset that the Grizzlies got in the Desmond Bane deal?
Next year's Suns pick.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, I don't think the Grizzlies are disappointed with this development. One more thing before we pivot to the Rockets. And please, if you think I'm flawed in thinking, please step forward. Should the Suns just have ignored what KD wanted and traded him to the Warriors at the trade deadline?
Yes. Yeah, honestly, yes.
Because wouldn't they have had Jimmy? I mean, would they not have had Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga? Am I wrong in saying that? They would have had those.
You have better info here than I do. So I'm legitimately asking: were the Warriors willing to do that with KD saying, "Don't get me"?
No. The Warriors were the ones who backed out of it. You're right.
Okay. So,
but you're correct on that. But
look, if the Suns have been able to do that trade, that was a much better return than the trade they got now. There's no question.
Okay, let me ask you this: should they have ignored what KD wanted and did the deal with Minnesota?
Again,
that's the problem. These are all sure, if you could just put in a trade machine, we're going to send Kevin Durant somewhere and get stuff back that's better. Yeah, that's great. But the other teams involved here are part of the trade. It's not like the other team was saying, please give us Kevin Durant, even though he doesn't want to come here.
Yeah, and I think it would have been a bad idea for Minnesota to ignore KD's saying,
that trade also just didn't again, like we talked about before, a Rudy Gobert trade for Kevin Durant did not make sense for Minnesota, despite what people might say about the value of Rudy Gobert and Kevin Durant. It would have made the Wolves worse. So
this to me was always, Houston was always the place that made the most sense.
Yes, as the process played out, the Rockets were the team where it worked because of
what I would say to your point, Brian, is and you were all over this story in February, so you should correct me if I'm wrong on this for sure. But if the Suns had worked with Kevin a little better in February and greased the skids to get him to Golden State in February, that would have been a much better outcome than this outcome for the Suns. But
yes, I agree.
But short of that happening, right? That is now off the board. You look at the options available now. The options available now, this is the best that they had, which is the best of a very, mediocre lot. And it's, again, to me, it's less about the merits of this specific trade than it is the all-encompassing nature of everything that's gone wrong the past couple of years, to MacMahon's point, of just the continual throwing assets down the drain repeatedly and all these various decisions that have all led up to this, which is why I am very curious to see what the next couple of weeks look like because of where it could land them.
Let me amend my point. KD controlled his last 2 trades. He controlled getting himself to Phoenix, and he controlled blocking or disengaging the Warriors and Wolves.
Correct.
To some level. Yet Phoenix paid a massive premium to get him, and then had to sell him for less because of the
lack of a competitive market.
So they paid a huge price in a non-competitive market the first time around, and then paid, sold low for the same reason. 2.5 years later.
Made a big splash. There was a lot of sizzle. There was little substance in terms of winning. KD won a playoff series in Phoenix. And then they had to sell, I don't know, I'm not going to say pennies on the dollar, but certainly change on the dollar.
I'm just saying, when he came to Phoenix, it was the only place he wanted to go. He said, he told the Nets, I only wanted to be traded to the Suns. Am I
And they
wrong?
gave up 4 picks and 3 swaps and 2 very
Mikal
good young
Bridges
players.
and Cam Johnson.
Yeah, that was an immense haul, and this is a fraction of that.
One more thing. 2018. Do you remember when the Suns traded for Dillon Brooks? But
Yeah, that's
the
right.
Grizzlies
Sure
thought it was
do.
Marshawn Brooks.
Yeah, no, I don't know where Marshawn is, but Dillon is definitely going to Phoenix this time around.
Well, maybe not. We'll see.
I think Marshawn might be playing in China. I'm not sure.
All right, I just remembered that the
Yeah,
Brooks
no, this is
conspiracy.
the Rockets only had one Brooks. There might have been some confusion if there was other guys involved, but there's only one Brooks.
Whatever that was. I don't even remember who else was involved. I just remember it was a 3-team trade.
Kelly
And-
Oubre was involved. I believe.
Wasn't
Okay.
Austin Rivers involved? I don't know. I remember. I
Yeah,
just
whatever
remember
it was.
concerns.
I think Woj reported. I remember Woj reporting Dillon Brooks, blah, 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 Dillon Brooks and whatever to Phoenix. And then like 5 minutes later, he was like, oh, correction. It was actually Marshawn Brooks.
And the Suns were like, correction. That's
Wait a
all we
minute.
agreed
I want
on.
to correct that correction.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. Anyway, the Rockets, as we've talked about for months, I don't think the Rockets wanted to trade for a 37-year-old player, but they got the price to a point here. I mean, just so you know, the Rockets,
didn't want to pay a premium for a 37-year-old player.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
this is the thing I was going to say before. The Suns have been waiting for weeks for somebody to blink, and nobody did.
So why
They
make the
kept
deal?
that- I think because they decided they had to move forward, and nobody was going to budge. There's been none of this has, I think, changed for a while. Like
Yeah.
Miami's offer, I don't believe was changing. They were not putting in the more attractive stuff. I don't think Houston's offer was changing. I don't think they were putting in the more attractive stuff.
Miami had an before, because I'm starting to see people say, oh my gosh, the Heat lost. Miami had a chance to make a better offer at the trade deadline and elected not to make it. And they had a chance to make a better offer. Now, maybe they couldn't outbid Houston anyway, but I'm just telling you.
No, they could have
had a
outbidded
chance.
Houston if they chose to. They chose not to. The Heat
Right.
actively
Chose
chose
not
to
to
get
give up.
Andrew. The Heat actively chose to get Andrew Wiggins and a first-round pick in February, then trade picks with stuff to get Kevin Durant in February. They made that active decision. And by the way, then they then lost by $1 billion to the Cavs in the first round of the playoffs. Like this Heat team giving up future assets for a 37-year-old Kevin Durant didn't make any sense at all.
No, whereas I do think it does make a lot of sense for Houston, this particular trade, not giving up the farm for Kevin Durant. And again, their whole thing was they didn't want to make a deal that shortened the runway, but they knew they needed a go-to guy. They knew that was the one massive missing piece. But they've got a chance, I think, to be, we can play semantics on contender, but this was a 2 seed that gave the Warriors a very competitive series. As my light goes out, is like young, athletic, tough. And now they're adding a guy who's still one of the most skilled players in the league. I love this move for the Rockets.
Look, the Rockets essentially have taken Jalen Green out of their lineup, an inefficient, not all that great scorer who on this team.
Well, he was sometimes great. He was great about
had
1.5
moments.
out of.
Listen,
yeah.
he had moments, but he was not a player that was good enough to be the best perimeter scorer on a team that's trying to win anything. Maybe
His
he will be
playoff
in the
series,
future.
one big splash game, and the rest was blah. That's kind of Jalen
And
Green.
their team was an excellent defensive team that was mediocre to bad on offense a lot of the time, and they grinded out a lot of wins. Right? They now have added Kevin Durant to that team, and essentially just in place of Jalen Green. They'll have Fred VanVleet back. They can, assuming they don't make any other trades. Which, by the way, they have kept virtually all their assets, so they could go make another big trade if they want this.
Yeah,
summer.
and by the way, they were probably going to trade the 10th pick no matter what. They were probably going to trade. They didn't have room for another young asset on this team. Now, obviously, if there's a guy at 10 that they were in love with and like, oh my God, this is a perfect fit, they would have done it. They couldn't play their lottery pick last year.
Right.
So
Reed Shepard barely played. Yeah.
This 10, and they couldn't get him, and they wouldn't trade him either. This pick was probably not going to go to Houston anyway. So yeah, they give a lottery pick here, but they didn't even value that pick. Like,
But again, it's a lottery pick that they got by making a great deal with Brooklyn last year.
By the way, let's just do this right now. Let's just do this since I've got a pen and I'm writing stuff down.
Here we go.
I like it.
Let's write down how many things that the Rockets have that they value more than Jalen Green, the number 10 pick.
Okay. Amin Thompson.
Hold on. He's got it right.
Got it. Keep going.
Amin Thompson.
Yep.
Jabari Smith. Tari Eason. Reed Shepherd. Alperen Şengün. He honestly should be higher on that list.
There's no order on these.
Reed Shepherd.
The other two Suns picks that they have.
Yep.
I think that's I
don't know. What about the Mavericks? What about the Mavericks pick?
The Mavericks pick, yes. Definitely.
Probably.
Definitely.
Although the value on that over the last couple of years is the Mavs have traded Luka, won the lottery.
I still think people would take a swing on Dallas at the moment, given where Dallas is at.
All right. What about Fred VanVleet?
They love Fred VanVleet.
Okay, I'm putting him on.
Fred is.
He's the
you don't think
captain.
the Suns would have taken Fred VanVleet? I'm putting him on there.
No, for sure.
Oh God, Fred VanVleet's exactly the kind of point guard the Suns need.
That's a minimum of 8 or 9 assets that.
Okay, and look, the other thing about trading Jalen Green, it probably opens up minutes for Reed Shepherd, who last year and Reed Shepherd was not in the rotation. He was hurt at the time, but he hadn't really been in the rotation. When I went down there and wrote this story about the Rockets are primed to make a big splash, but it's a very cautious approach. I was told they think Reed Shepherd might be the most talented offensive player on that roster.
Yes.
Not anymore. Kevin Durant is now, but
but look, I also think, again, if you're talking about knock-on effects of this trade, let's just say the Rockets are who they are, basically, right? I really like Jabari Smith. I think he's a really good player as a forward who can shoot it and guard multiple positions. Moving Dillon Brooks out of there in particular, you move Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green out. There's now more minutes for Jabari Smith to play, whose minutes would sometimes fluctuate last year. There's more minutes and more of a role for Amin Thompson, even more than what he had before. He's obviously a focal point for them going forward. There's more minutes for Tari Eason going forward. There's arguably even more minutes for Cam Whitmore going forward, who is an interesting player, who's had an up and down career so far. He's been to the G League some. He's had some public battles with Ime Udoka.
Second apron stuff here. The Suns are still in the second apron. In another construction of this trade, they probably could have asked for Cam Whitmore in this trade.
Yeah.
But they couldn't get him in this trade because they would have taken back too much money.
Right.
So, I'm not sure exactly. I just to be clear, I don't have the exact reporting on the construction, but even if they were willing to give Cam Whitmore,
they couldn't have done all 3 of those guys for Durant.
Right. So there's where the second apron bites you. And I think the point is whether let's throw the 2 Suns picks they have out because maybe those picks neither will be in the top 10 because the Suns can look you in the eye and say we traded for a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
They're at the very bottom line. They probably didn't trade their 5 preferred assets.
I'm talking young players. Young players.
5 preferred young players.
Yeah, their 5 most valued young players are still in the roster.
They didn't trade any of their really good two-way young players. Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Amin Thompson. Those guys are completely.
And they got Kevin Durant.
Don't ask.
And that's what the Suns were. Yeah. That's what the Suns have been hoping for. They've been hoping for somebody, whether it's Miami to put in Khalil Ware, whether it's Houston to put in one of these guys, whether it's Minnesota to want to do something, where it's San Antonio to want, whatever, name the team, right? They were hoping somebody would go, we got to get Kevin Durant and jump in and do what the Suns, not to the same degree the Suns did, but to do what the Suns did 2.5 years ago and overpay. But everybody saw the situation for what it was, where Kevin Durant is a distressed asset who's 37, who has an injury history, who's going to want a ton of money, who, by the way, has won 2 playoff series in the last 6 years. So I think there is some question about the level of winning he can drive still. Now, I do think Houston is the perfect place for him to go. A bunch of young athletic dudes around him, an offense that is pretty isolation heavy, where they're going to let Kevin be able to have the ball and operate and work around these guys. gives a parent Şengün more room to operate inside. Like, I think basketball-wise, this was easily the best fit by a mile with a coach he's got a relationship with and likes. Like, I do think it's a very good trade for the Rockets. And look, if there's a big fish that comes available between now and the trade deadline in February, they could still go get a guy because they have all this stuff to trade.
I don't think the Rockets are hoping for a big fish to become available. Their whole thing was they wanted their young core to be able to grow. And
well, listen, I'm not saying
I'll be honest, I never really bought the belief they were selling in Jalen Green. Whatever. He was down the list of the guys who I think have the most value to the Rockets. By the way, just in terms of fit, Jackson's performance as a producer today, much, much better than his pickup performance. Here you go. Rockets, 7th in isolations per game last season, but 27th in points per ISO. Durant led the league in points per ISO among high usage guys, among guys who run at least 200. They got still at 37. KD is one of, if not the best ISO player, and they just didn't have the guy who could get them buckets when things stalled. They didn't have the guy late in the fourth quarter of a playoff game. They didn't have the guy who you could say, hey, get us a bucket. This is going to be an elite defensive team. This is going to be an elite rebounding team. That's how they had an ugly ass offense and were still a second seed that gave the Warriors a tough series. Now they've got that go-to guy. We'll see how long he's at that level, but at least a couple of years. If it's a 2-year extension, that third year, maybe it's tough. But again, they did it without sacrificing young core.
Even if they don't extend, let's say Kevin Durant doesn't extend. Let's say it's a 1-year deal. I still think it's a big win for Houston.
Yeah.
Like, this is a no doubt trade for them.
They get off of Jalen Green's contract.
And they get off of Dylan Brooks's money, which Dylan Brooks's contract is fine, but can turn, like, to MacMahon's point, if he's in Phoenix, he'll be useful. If they want to trade him for an asset, he's useful places. But they have a lot of guys who could play that role between Tyrese and Jabari Smith and Amen Thompson. Like, that's an expendable piece. They have a million young players and draft picks, so the 10th pick is an expendable piece. And look, Jalen Green was their dominant perimeter shooter last year, right? He shot 42% overall. He shot 35% from three on 17 attempts a game from the field. In the playoffs, he played 30 minutes. He shot 37% from the field. He shot 29% from three. They replaced that with Kevin Durant.
The Rockets have a chance to be
a
drastically better offensive team with Durant. And then again, Reed Shepherd is a wild card in all this.
All right, let's talk about the let's talk about the bigger picture with the Rockets. Okay. I want to talk about what they did with the Steven Adams. They signed Steven Adams last week to a contract extension. And he's a quality role-playing big man who would have gotten attention on the market. They kept him off the market. But I want to talk about the contract he did. He signed a contract that descends in value. Mm-hmm. It's $14 million, $13 million, $11 million. They're doing that because they're trying to already manage the salaries that they've got. So this summer, they are in position to extend Jabari Smith. I would think, since they kept him out of this trade, that they intend to do so. But
and Tari
Eason. Then the year after that, they have to take care, 1 year from now, they have to take care of Amen Thompson. And if Amen Thompson has another year like he did this last year,
I think that's a max.
I'm coming, that's fun max territory. I mean, I know that we're in the era where the fun max is under threat because of the apron.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
I don't think he's good. Yeah, I don't think that's
whatever the number. It's going to be be a big extension.
They did some maneuvering on both Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green's extensions last year, where they didn't yield. So that's why that's why I don't just flippantly say, oh yeah, they're going to give, that's why I want to know what the Durant extension is. And also remember, Fred VanVleet, they have a team option on him for next season. Now he's going to be a Rocket. There's no way that they're going to not pick that up unless they have an understanding of what a new contract is going to be. But here's my thing. I just said they got to pay, and this is where the second apron thing is different. In the past, it was like, Tillman Fertitta, are you okay with having a $300 million payroll with taxes? You are? Okay, fine. Let's pay all these dudes.
All right.
Now you can't do that. So that's my question. In the next They probably already have an understanding with Durant now. And if they don't, they got a pretty good, it's going to be fast. They better have an understanding with Fred VanVleet now. And if they don't, it's going to be fast. So what happens with Durant and VanVleet are going to be key in the next few days.
They already moved VanVleet's option date back to help facilitate any moves they could make, right? So they've already been working with Fred on this. I'm sure Fred will be there, to your point. It would certainly make sense if Fred opts out of this $44 million and signs for a longer-term deal on lower numbers that allows for them to have more flexibility going forward. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen.
Although the other thing that could make sense is for them to give him the 44 with an understanding of, hey, we can't officially do it now, but this 44 is essentially, we're going to give you this lump sum now and a massive pay cut later, but this is to keep you around for the next 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
That's a possibility.
There's different ways. There's different ways to do that, right?
What the certainty is Fred VanVleet is firmly in their plans. Fred VanVleet is completely aligned with Rafael Stone, with Ime Udoka, with Patrick Fertitta, and he is a huge part of that franchise's management, coaching staff, and on the floor. Like he's
one of the best leaders in the league, one of the best locker room presences in the league. Like obviously won a title with Toronto, tough as nails. Like exactly the kind of guy you think Ime Udoka would love to have as his point guard. Like it's not a coincidence Fred has shown up there. These young guys have all gotten better. Like, he's definitely going to be there. And but that's the point, right? Like they're working with Fred VanVleet. Ime Udoka's got a long-standing relationship with Kevin Durant. Like he's going to walk in there with, I'm sure, some understanding of what it is they're trying to do. Like,
they were together in Brooklyn for a year. They were together with Team USA. And by the way, Royale Ivey, one of Ime's assistants, a guy who I think's got future head coach potential. Certainly had a hell of a run with South Sudan's national team.
One of Kevin's best friends.
Yeah, college teammate.
Yeah.
For years, teams have been hiring Royale Ivey, and they've been like, "Oh, they're doing it to get Durant."
I think he actually played with him here in OKC too, didn't he?
And to your point on the second apron thing, Brian, you make a really good point about the Rockets. Now, I didn't like the Jalen Green deal at the time. That doesn't matter.
But it served its function. I mean,
it did serve its function, but that's not the point of the discussion, though. But the Alperen Şengün deal, I think, is very instructive of where the Rockets were thinking ahead in ways that a lot of other teams were not. Alperen Şengün, when he was up for his extension, a lot of other teams would have just given him a max deal. He'd already gotten off to a great start in his career. He was on an all-star trajectory. He may have already made the all-star team. I don't remember if this was his first year. He made, or if last year was. But
last year was.
He was
the
kind
fun max zone.
Yes, the fun max doesn't really exist anymore. At least it shouldn't, because you have to mind every single dollar on your books. And I'm looking at Bobby Marks' sheet. So going forward, a guy in Alperen Şengün who could have been on the 25% max, right? Here's his percentage of the cap under Bobby's projections for the next 4 years. 18%, 17%, 16%, 15%. If you have a guy like that and you're paying him 15% instead of 24%, right?
Yeah.
That is very easily the difference between one or two more good players being on your team. That's the kind of stuff that more teams have to start thinking about, and not just giving away extra money on extensions and deals, because then you look a year or two later and go, oh man, we're now bumping up against the second apron. Like look at Minnesota.
Look at Cleveland.
Look at Minnesota. They have to make decisions. Do they keep Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Naz Reid? And what do they do with Julius Randle? Can Cleveland keep Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill? Like, can Boston? We were talking all season. What's Boston? How many players is Boston going to lose because they're so expensive? You mentioned Phoenix couldn't get Cam Whitmore in this trade, at least in part because it cost too much money, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't aggregate that way. So that's why it's really, I think, critically important for teams to be hyper focused on every dollar in these deals. And you might have to negotiate a little bit. I'm sure the Şengün negotiations were a little rockier than it would have been if
they didn't happen until right before the deadline.
That's right. We weren't sure they were going to take it.
That's right.
But both Jalen Green and Şengün both did the deals right at the end, and the Rockets quote unquote won those.
And that extra $20 or $30 million over the life of Şengün's deal, that could be the difference between them
Well,
keeping Tari Eason or keeping Jabari Smith or somebody else.
Just stick with your percentages. This is the way smart teams have been talking for a few years, not the actual dollars, but the percentages of the cap. If you sign 2 players to 25% of the cap, that's half of your salary cap. If you sign 1 to 18% and 1 to 21%, you've just created a spot for a whole nother player just on percentages. And then as the cap goes on, obviously the cap will go up and that percentages goes down. So maybe you don't necessarily keep a player the first year you negotiate hard, but maybe in the third year you're able to do that. And that's like look, today the Oklahoma City Thunder are 100% focused on trying to get their first championship. That is what this is all about. They can't be bothered with what Kevin Durant's being traded for. They can't be bothered on this other stuff. But when this is over, they've got 3 contracts to sign. Okay, they've got to do
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren,
Jalen Williams,
and
Chet Holmgren. And if they can squeeze 2 or 3 percentage points underneath, if they could get Chet Holmgren for 21%, 22%, if they could somehow get Jalen,
or like I'm not putting words in the guy's mouth. As far as I know, he's never addressed this. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who represents himself now, if he basically says, "Hey, I want to maximize our chances of contending. I'll take a little bit less than the full supermax." Like there's a lot of possibilities.
How do you keep Case and Wallace in 3 years? You get Chet Holmgren to take 20% instead of 25% of your cap.
Yeah, because like you said, it's not just as simple as you pay everybody, right? It's not just the owner's got to pay money. Like the Thunder are a good example. They in 2014 and 2015 were saving money in 2012 and 2013 to pay the Kevin Durant, Serge Ibaka, Russell Westbrook Thunder after they all re-signed. Now, obviously, history went in a different direction, but they wound up having a gigantic luxury tax bill for Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and Carmelo Anthony. And that money was money they had earmarked 4 or 5 years earlier.
With all those picks they have, like they didn't make some splashy all-in trade because they knew, like, hey, this payroll, if things progress the way we anticipate, is going to get big.
Yes, and so now it's a combination of you have to be planning ahead financially, right, which the Thunder have been doing to pay all of these guys from a pure monetary standpoint, but you also have to plan ahead from a salary number perspective on the cap, because you can go in the second apron for a couple of years, but once you do, there's a time crunch because of all the limitations you have on your roster between the draft pick stuff, you can't sign guys over the minimum, you can't aggregate all these things. It just really restricts what you can do with your team. So when you're going to go in there, A, you got to be good enough to win, and B, you got to be able to get back out. And so that's the calculus all these teams have to make. And like, look, Orlando just made this Desmond trade. I really like this trade for them. But like, we'll see if they didn't negotiate on Franz Wagner. They gave Franz Wagner the full 25% fund max. They didn't really fight with him on that. We'll see if in a couple of years, we'll see where Orlando's books are at. Maybe they'll have to start making hard decisions, and that extra $10 million might end up making a huge difference for them.
The other element of the negotiations with, I think, Jabari Smith Jr. in particular, a former number 3 overall pick, a guy who certainly has shown that he's a quality 2-way player. He was coming off the bench last year. Because Amin Thompson took that job when Jabari Smith Jr. was out and just like was never coming out of the starting lineup. I wonder now if, is it as simple as, hey, Jabari, you're back in the starting lineup. You're assured of a starting role, and you kind of take that element out of any extension discussions. I don't know that because Tari Eason also could very easily slide into the starting lineup.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot we're going to have to discuss. There's going to be more that these teams do, and I cannot wait for what happens with this Durant contract and what happens with Fred VanVleet, because Rafael Stone has had a very successful campaign as the Rockets general manager.
Yeah.
And
starting with a full-blown teardown.
Patrick Fertitta, Tillman's son, has played an important role. Tillman is now the ambassador to Italy.
Yeah.
He's having Cassius Pepe. I don't know if he's how how much
He's never Tillman's never really been involved in the day-to-day. Tillman's contribution has been getting out of the way after the Chris Paul trade.
Well, he's
I don't
been
know,
paying for
but
it.
seriously, it has been about, okay, you guys think this is the best route, I'll buy it, and then staying patient when it was painful, because there were 3 ugly years in Houston, but that was what they had to go through.
I remember the press conference after the Harden deal, and he explained what their thought process was. And for an owner who's still very much a new owner, hearing that, it was, you could tell that it was a hard sell to the fans, much less the guy who bought the team and then ran
and who bought the team when they were right before they had a 65-win season and the whole hamstring away thing.
His first game as owner, they won in the defending champion Warriors. I think they opened the season. I don't know if it was the first game or the second game. Right out of the gate, they won in Golden State in the first few games of him being an owner, and he was running on the court celebrating.
Yeah.
Well, and to go full circle to where we started with this, like, there's a lot of parallels between the Tillman Fertitta beginning of his run and the Matt Ishbia beginning of his run. And Tillman Fertitta learned his lessons, and, you know, we've made jokes about the experts now being out of the way. Tillman Fertitta let his front office do its job, and it took a couple of years, and they didn't get everything right. Like, they drafted Jalen Green over Evan Mobley, which obviously in retrospect isn't great. But if you look at the arc of what they've done, they built a damn good team. They got a ton of assets. They have now added Kevin Durant without sacrificing all this stuff. They're signing guys to good contracts. Like, you know, it's going to be very difficult to catch Oklahoma City, but like, Houston's sitting here, and for the rest of the decade, there are very few teams other than Oklahoma City. Like right now, you might even take them over San Antonio, even though San Antonio's victor in the West, because of the amount of stuff the Rockets have amassed on this, including getting Ime Udoka to coach the team. So, like, if you're Phoenix, to go back to the beginning, yes, this trade does not feel great to make, and let's see what they do over the next week or two. But, like, at some point, there has to be a looking in the mirror moment to go, we have to do things differently. Can't just keep trying to chase instant gratification of winning today and try, you know, it's like, we're going to win the championship this year thing. It's not going to work. And I think we'll have a much better sense between now and July 1 or July 6th or July 8th, whether the Suns have started to learn some lessons or whether they're now just going to take this stuff and throw it at some other guys who are going to try to win now with Devin Booker to win 40 games.
These are 2 new owners who over the last, since Ishbia has bought the team in the last 5 years for the Rockets, have taken polar opposite approaches. The Rockets are benefiting greatly from their approach, and the Rockets are also benefiting greatly from the Suns' approach.
All right. That's enough for our emergency pod.
On to Game 7.
Let's cover Game 7. Real quick, you guys probably saw it, that Durant was on stage at the Fanatics Fest in New York City when Shams broke the news. There's a ton of people saying this is when Durant found out. It was really cool to see because he had this huge smile on his face and everybody was screaming. I believe he was being interviewed by Taylor Rooks on stage, and everybody was screaming, "You just got traded." And he had this big smile on his face.
He's like, "Oh, I know."
To
one of his preferred destinations.
Yes. Obviously he knew that it was about to happen. He may not have known it had been agreed to, but when he walked on stage, he knew. But whatever, I don't want to mess with him. Just so you know, like he's given some interviews afterwards, sort of saying that same thing. But it was still a unique thing to see, and so that, I mean, we've seen guys, we hear guys tell stories about where they were when they found out. This one was, in front of hundreds, if not thousands of fans. I don't know how many people were there. So, all right. Thank you to MacMahon and to Jackson for cutting their pickup game short to come record this podcast.
No, I finished the domination. Kind of, really, if I'm being honest, it was kind of like an Alpi Şengün type of performance from me today.
All offense, no defense.
Listen, man, they were a top 5 defense in the league last year, buddy.
I said what I said. All right. On to Game 7. We got a bunch of free agency and draft stuff coming. I recorded a podcast earlier today with Jonathan Gavoni. So we'll have that with the draft, starting to turn the page to that. And Game 7.
Post Game 7, live stream, I believe.
these are busy days.
Adios, amigos.